Hi, in this video I'd like to talk about the pancreas and the gallbladder. One comment before I start. So I've noticed that my previous videos have actually been over 15 minutes and YouTube only allows videos that are at most 15 minutes. So I'm going to try to create shorter videos and give a really rough, quick overview of the subject at hand. Alright, so first onto the pancreas and gallbladder. So first, the pancreas is shaped like this and is typically goes around the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestine, or wraps behind it, and is typically intimately linked. The pancreas is both an endocrine and a exocrine organ, meaning that it has functions in which it both has functions where it both releases things both into the outside, the exocrine functions in which it releases enzymes and fluids into the small intestine that helps food digestion, as well as into the blood vessels, which is endocrine, which is important for signaling. So in fact, the pancreas is the major site of secretion for insulin and glucagon, which are two of the major regulators of blood sugar, and this dysregulation is often exhibited as diabetes. These hormones are excreted into the splenic vein, which goes to the spleen and passed on to systemic circulation. In terms of exocrine excretion, the pancreas secretes a variety of very important enzymes that are responsible for digestion of every possible kind of macromolecule that the body can see. For example, it excretes amylase, which is important for the digestion of carbs. It secretes lipase, which is important for the digestion of fats. It also secretes proteases, which are enzymes that helps break down proteins, as well as nucleases, which are enzymes that break down nucleic acids, RNA and DNA. So of note, both the amylase and lipases are stored in acinar cells in granular vesicles where they're actually activated. They don't need any kind of post-translational modification in which these enzymes are just packed together really tightly at a low pH where they're not super active and just ready to be released. Proteases, one of the typical pancreatic proteases is the trypsin, is actually packaged as a zymogen, which means that trypsin is typically packaged as trypsinogen, which requires exogenous cleavage, which means that there are molecules in the small intestine, particularly the brush border, that helps cleave the trypsinogen, an inactive molecule, into trypsin, which is activated and helps activate other molecules that help work together to cause digestion. So these are four main products that are secreted from acinar cells, which make up the bulk of the pancreas, of which let's say it's around 80%, and another 16% of cells are duct epithelial cells. And in addition to being simple cells that line the ducts, the duct epithelial cells actually secrete a number of ions that are responsible for creating the water or the flow that helps wash these things out. So this includes bicarb, chloride, and water, of course. So the bicarb helps make pancreatic juices basic, which helps deacidify the acidic excretions or the chyme from the stomach. So let's take a brief step back and look at the anatomy. So the pancreas secretes into the second part of the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine, through the pancreatic duct. The pancreatic duct merges with the hepatic duct, or the common hepatic duct, which is formed from the cystic duct, which is from the bile gallbladder, and the left and right hepatic ducts, which actually come from the liver. Together, they form a muscular region called the sphincter of Oddi, which controls whether the secretions, both from the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas, are excreted out. So before we talk about the gallbladder, you can't help but mention the liver. The liver is the site of construction or synthesis of the bile salts, of bile. In fact, the liver is the site of all the synthesis. And it's only because when you're not actively eating that this sphincter of Oddi is closed and it's backed up and stays within the gallbladder. So the gallbladder is actually a storage organ. The bile, which is originally from the liver, is stored in the gallbladder and has a couple of major components. First is bile acids, which comprise of 50% of its organic solutes. Bile acids help emulsify fat. So bile salts are really crucial for the digestion of fats and lipids. These macromolecules are not very well water soluble, so this secretion of bile acids, phospholipids, and cholesterol work together to help emulsify the fats, which break them into smaller and smaller pieces, because these molecules are generally amphipathic, which means that they both have a water soluble side, a hydrophilic side, and a hydrophobic side, in which that mingles well with the lipids. And together they can create micelles, which are essentially structures that breaks down the amount or increases the amount of surface area of fats accessible to water-soluble proteins, the amylases and other proteins that help digest food, and increases the amount of surface area for access to these good, nutritious macromolecules. Also, keep in note, bile is actually the only way our body can excrete cholesterol. And this is, I guess, with people with high cholesterol can often have decreased cholesterol excretion or increased cholesterol synthesis. I'll talk about it more in a further lecture. But in addition, bile also contains bilirubin, which is a pigment that is secreted from the liver, which absorbs it from the breakdown of red blood cells. This is a breakdown product of hemoglobin, and bilirubin is actually what gives both our stool the dark color and our urine the light yellow color. You see, what happens is that red blood cells from systemic circulation goes through into the liver, is broken down, and these broken down cells excrete bilirubin. The bilirubin is actually reabsorbed in the small intestine or partially reabsorbed and broken down into other products, which can actually be excreted in the urine, or some products can be excreted in the stool, or which is not reabsorbed in the small intestine. So, in summary, the pancreas and gallbladder are two peripheral organs that are actually really important in digestion. They're particularly important in digestion of fats and lipids because they're hard to digest without extra molecules. In particular, they're not water soluble, so the liver secretes a lot of bile, which contains bile acids, phospholipids, and cholesterol that can work together to create micelles and increase the surface area or increase access to these fats. The pancreas is responsible for most of the enzymes responsible for the digestion of everything from carbohydrates, lipids, fats, and to nucleic acids. And together, they are both excreted in the second part of the duodenum at the sphincter of Oddi. and reabsorbed throughout the small intestine. In particular, bile acids are reabsorbed in the ileum, and if you have problems with the ileum, it actually can cause problems with fat reabsorption. And decreased fat resorption actually can decrease the amount of vitamins that you get. There are a couple of fat-only soluble vitamins, such as A, D, E, and K, which are essential for bile acids are essential for their absorption. And if you have any problems with the ileum, it can also cause decreased absorption of vitamin B12, which is uniquely absorbed in the small intestine.